calling to order the Kingston Springs Regional Planning Commission for October 14th. And I'm going to have a roll call of voting members. Keith Allgood, absent. Tony Campbell? Here. Josh Heatherly is absent. Tony Gross?
Here.
Lauren Hill is absent. Brian McCain? Here. Mike Padma, that's me, here. Chuck Slater?
Here.
And Bob Stoller?
Here.
Non-voting staff, Sharon Armstrong?
Here.
John Lawless?
Here.
Martha Brooke Berry is absent. Is Brittany Stanley here?
She is not.
She's absent. Okay. We do have a quorum. And so you have the September 9th meeting minutes before you. Do we have a motion to approve those?
So moved.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we've approved the September 9th Planning Commission meeting minutes. And Keith Allgood's here now. We can list him as here too.
Well, it's only 7 o'clock now. He's technically on time.
Sorry, Keith, I jumped the gun. Sorry. Next time I'll wait till 7.
Police officer.
Oh, there you go. I'm stuck on
You're not in charge.
Okay, so now we have today's agenda before you, the October 14th agenda. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, today's meeting agenda is approved. So now, the next item on the agenda is community input. Is there anybody here who wants to address the Planning Commission? I'm looking for hands. If you do, okay. If you could tell me your name, pardon me?
We just,
It doesn't have anything to do with
minutes.
No, we got the meeting minutes. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I appreciate it.
I
So if you could tell me your name and your address.
Sure, my name is Kathy Forrester. I live at 106 Madeline Way in Kingston Springs.
Okay.
And I'm here just to make sure that I understand that there's going to be storm drainage put in level 2 of the Ellerslie subdivision.
Okay.
My neighbor and I still have water drainage problems.
Okay.
And they were there before the building started behind us. So
Okay.
they continue.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else for community input? Okay. All right, old business. We start with update on the Ellerslie subdivision. Ron Merville, notice of violation for erosion and sediment control, about approval lapse, code enforcement complaints, and HOA documents, and then there are a lot of sub-bullets. Do I need to read these out loud? Do I need to read each of these?
No, sir, we'll address these one at a time.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I believe that we are joined tonight by Mr. Merville. We are also joined, John, who's joining us?
It looks like Ms. Merville.
Mrs. Merville is joining us via Zoom, and Mr. Reisner, who is joining us as well, is over on the other side. Think back to our August meeting, I asked the Planning Commission to give direction on 4 items for the Ellerslie project. Those are in front of you in your packet. During the course of the last 2 months, there have been multiple conversations, emails, phone calls, and a number of documents have been submitted to staff for review. So I'm going to, with your permission, address these one at a time and answer any questions that you may have of staff. And then the applicant is then prepared to speak.
Okay, and I just have a question for you. Is this information update to the Planning Commission? Is that what this is?
This is an information update, and I'm also going to be requesting some additional action tonight.
Okay, all right.
With regard to these 4 no new
Okay,
items, the same 4 items.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Planning Commissioners. I want to take these in order in your packet as they appear. Soil and erosion occurring on lots, causing damage to the road surface. Mr. Lawless has placed on the screen behind you the submission done by Dr. Lovelace for the property as an SWIP and soil erosion plan. The first is just an outline of the general layout of lots for phase 1. If you could change that screen for me, John, please. Thank you.
That's it for this particular, that's it.
That's it? Okay, in your packet, I apologize. We have John put that one on the screen. We have a very large agenda tonight, a lot of items. John, It's located at 39 Chapter in the larger packet.
Yes.
The larger packet. So, we could review the SWIP plan that has been presented by Ryan Lovelace of Civil Site Design Group, or I can simply tell you what components and elements are. And I'll leave that to your discretion. We asked for a soil erosion plan to address the runoff on this property for phase 1, 2, and 3. Many of you are familiar with the site and the topography of the site, as phase 1 is closest to Kingston Springs Road. Phase 2 and phase 3 lie beyond that, going up the hill. Water is coming from down the hill. It's being somewhat stopped before it gets to phase 1 by some stormwater issues or stormwater measures that were placed about a month and a half ago. But the flow of water, as you just heard from a resident, has not stopped. So I spoke to Mr. Lovelace at length regarding the plan that he submitted and asked him, was the plan sufficient to stop the flow of water from entering people's houses and on their lots and onto the street and down the curb and gutter? And he said it would slow it down, but he could give me no assurances that it would cure it. I asked him why the decision was made by him not to submit a grading plan and soil erosion plan for all 3 phases. And he said that it was not his decision, was what he said. So we required, by Planning Commission vote in the last meeting, a grading and soil erosion plan for all 3 phases of this property. I'm not interested so much in the development of phase 2 and 3, because that appears to be somewhere down the line, the timeline, but I'm keenly interested in stopping the flow of water onto developed lots that's creating such an issue within the community. And it's also a violation of our stormwater ordinance. So tonight, I would like to request a second time that the Planning Commission require the applicant to submit a grading plan for all 3 phases. In the interim, it is the intent of staff, after much discussion and much back and forth, that we will proceed enforcement activities that are available to us in order to incur compliance. The applicant is in possession of a SWIP and a TDEC permit that was submitted for phase 1 only, but it's the responsibility of the developer to stop the water from going onto other people's property. It's not a complex concept. It's required of every single person who develops. So we're going to cite the applicant formally by letter, give them a period of days to resolve the issue. If it's not resolved, just like any other code enforcement action, it will proceed to a citation to court. So that's the intent of staff for item number 1. Item number 2, the planned unit development had a 2-year lifespan. We are not interested in having the PUD expire or go away completely, but the development plan was for 2 years. In conversation with the engineer for the project that was employed by the developer, Mr. Merville, Mr. Lovelace indicated that the time frame for development of phase 2 and 3 were somewhere between 10 and 20 years. I spoke to Mr. Merville, who explained that that had to be some sort of a miscommunication between him and the engineer that he employed, that his timeline is 5 years. Given that, and given where the PUD is at this point, it is my intent to engage in a redraft of the PUD, working with the applicant as best as we can, with the applicant's attorney, to expand this PUD and the timeline for this PUD to incorporate phase 2 and 3, because Mr. Merville has indicated that he is going to develop phase 2 and 3. So we need to encapsulate that within the PUD that had a 2-year lifetime, and if that expires some time ago, the market crashed, other things happened, all sorts of things happened in between. But from the prospect and from the standpoint of the city, we need that PUD document to be expanded and to include these things that you're requiring in that PUD agreement, along with some sort of a mitigated an immediate plan to address the issues that are occurring, that are hampering the residents of the lots right now. The other mechanism that is in our employ for the city right now is we have the ability to place a stop work order on all vacant lots, period. It is my intent to do so if forward momentum is not made. Not because the city is being punitive, not because we're being petty, but simply because this is causing an imposition to people who bought and paid for the houses and the lots on this property. And it's an everyday issue for them, and it needs to be addressed. So that takes care of the PUD discussion. The HOA. There are two controlling documents for this plan unit development. Both were drafted by Larry Craig, former city attorney. The first is the PUD agreement itself. The second is the covenants and restrictions. Those documents prohibit transfer of responsibility for the infrastructure improvements to the HOA until 90% of the lots are completed. That is not the circumstance. Phase 1 still has 8 lots under development. And you can see there aren't that many lots, so we're nowhere near 90%. So while the HOA can exist, the responsibility for the maintenance of the improvements for the infrastructure does not transfer to the HOA until the project is 90% complete. That's the first protocol to that. The second one, as I understand it, and after consulting with the city attorney as well, is that the HOA can be established once those 90% are done and after the infrastructure is completed and inspected by the city and determined to be sufficient for the subdivision and for the city's requirements within the subdivision regulations. So those two things have to occur before any liability or responsibility is transferred to the HOA for the upkeep and maintenance of any infrastructure. That's pretty much the path for every single plan and development or subdivision. So there's nothing out of the ordinary, just letting you know. Just advising you on that. And then grading, soil and erosion, curb, street, all of that. We asked for, staff asked for, and you kindly voted to require a change in the bonding requirements for this project. Currently, there is a $50,000 letter of credit that applies to this project and is renewed every single January, I believe 27th, John?
Yes.
January 27th. And we requested Mr. Merble, and he consented to provide an as-built performance bond rather than a letter of credit. It's a readily cashable bonding instrument that if something goes wrong, we can use to complete the improvements on this property. The engineer for Mr. Merble, Civil Site Design Group, calculated an amount of the bond and submitted it. I'm about midway through the process of running this through a pro forma, which has the standard cost for our area for these types of bonds. I'm not quite there, but I did a real quick run the other night, and this bond appears to be just a little bit short. So what I would like tonight is that we consider and entertain that bonding amount increasing based on the industry standard for the work that has to be done in Middle Tennessee, because as we know, the cost of labor and material are climbing. I would also like that to be written in a way that as costs for labor and material go up, the bonding amount goes up to match whatever those costs are. So in looking at this and calculating and asking an engineer who does this type of work every day to assist me, it appears that right now, if I use today's date, the requirement for this bond should be $389,763.19. I would like to round that to $390, with an addendum within the bonding agreement that once costs go up, those are absorbed within the bond. These bonds are not particularly cost prohibitive or difficult to secure, but they are superior for the project itself and for the city, because we're the ones who have to manage this project in case we need to use it. So Mr. Merkel has agreed to provide that type of bond. So those are the 4 things that I asked you to consider, and if you would like, Mr. Chairman, Once the applicants had time to speak, we'll revisit these so that we can get this seated in a motion if we can, and move forward. And with that, if anybody has questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Any questions from the board right now? Okay, so Mr. Merle? Yes, sir. Okay. Did you want to speak, or do you have somebody else here? Pardon me? Okay. Okay, well, I don't know that. You know that. Yes, sir. If you could tell us who you are, you're representing Mr. Merle.
I think I know most of you, but for those of you that don't know, my name is David Ryder. I'm an attorney here in the Kingston Springs area, and I represent the developer, one of those principals being Mr. Harville. He's here tonight, and I think we have Mr. Lovelace, I hope, is on Zoom, should we have some questions or some input needed from him in regards to the engineering information that has been provided. Let me just preface, before I take these items individually that Ms. Armstrong has addressed, let me just preface that and say that on behalf of the developer, they are still committed to completing this Ellerslie project phase 1. And want to do everything in good faith to make that happen. As Ms. Armstrong alluded to, over time, no fault to blame, but over time, the original agreement had expired, and then based on extenuating circumstances with the housing collapse, cost of materials, COVID, et cetera, just building blank, you can kind of see the roadmap of how we got here. But I just want to firmly state that they are committed to working with this body to move forward and get phase 1 completed. I will say, just so we can clear up a few things, because I know there's been a lot of he said, she said, kind of in terms of comments made. As of right now, it's my client's position that phase 1 is probably looking at a 4 to 6 year time frame for completion currently. The statements that were made in regards to the lots that were undeveloped is accurate. And there are 2 currently that have a stop work order on them that are the permit having been pulled by the contractor on those 2 new constructions that are probably, what was more about 90%, pretty close to being complete on that very back, closest to the hillside of what might be considered a phase 2. The 4 items that were, let me take each of those individually and kind of tell you where the developer and the engineer are on those items. One of those was the very first request was to provide a copy of the HOA documents that were a record. Those were provided, and I think Ms. Armstrong talked about those, so we'll round back to those in a few minutes. There was the request, I understand this body was requesting a performance bond. There was a letter of credit that was in place, which I guess I'm thinking is better, but we had no objection to converting that to a performance bond, and as part of the engineer's services he did, as Ms. Armstrong would say, put together that estimate and submit that along with the grading and soil erosion plan behind you. It's Mr. Lovelace's position, and he can speak to this particularly if you want to hear it, is that the plan that is submitted not only handles the water and drainage and soil erosion issues for phase 1, but also encompasses phase 2 and phase 3 as they exist, and the water that's allegedly flowing off of the property from above phase 1. The design, as I understand it, speaking with him, and I think he's made this clear to planning, is that the design submitted will accommodate phase 2 and phase 3 right now, because at this juncture, it's not the developer's intention to begin any development of phase 2 or phase 3 in the near future. We're probably estimating 10 plus years. So, to unnecessarily, I guess, incur the cost or 2 and 3 for something that may not occur that far out. It seems like whatever information might be submitted is going to be stale at some point in time anyway. And the engineer has made the representation that the design that he has submitted is sufficient to handle the current runoff that's coming off of what would be considered phase 2 or phase 3 property. So we'd ask you to give consideration to that. I will say that my client has any complaint that we have gotten as to water infiltration into any home or any problem with the drainage. He has made numerous trips to the site, spoken with each of those property owners individually, and explained to them what was being done, what was going to happen with the completion of phase 1, specifically in number 1, the 2 lots that are about 90% completion. Once, if those can be completed, there'll be sod put down, there'll be some more action taken on those particular lots. But as Ms. Armstrong said, it's alleged that most of the runoff is coming from above. Now, understand that it's our position most of this flooding occurred in extreme conditions. We don't see the flooding when there's just inch, 2 inches of rain at a time. It's just we've had over the past couple of months. I think there was one day we had 6 to 7 inches of rain, and that did present a problem, which certainly we take seriously. So we feel like we've been working with planning in good faith. It did take, trying to procure the services of the engineer and get on his schedule and rotation. It takes a little bit of time, but we finally were able to get that accomplished and get that submitted. Let's see here. As to phase 1, I think besides the development of the lots itself, I think there are only a couple of things that are left to do. The top coat on the paving needs to be done, and the developer was just holding off long enough for those final 2 lots to be finished until there were concrete trucks, other workers, etc., coming up in that very back alley that feeds the back of those 2 properties, and it just didn't make sense to go ahead and put on the top coat, inclusive of that alley all the way across, I guess east to west, and then there needs to be a top coat that's going to be applied to the main drive, I guess you could say, from Kingston Spring Road all the way up to the top of the hill, and even beyond a little bit from where the alley is now. So that can be completed fairly quickly. And once that is done and gotten to 90%, then we would move for the HOA to take that over. The only other item that I can see that needs to happen in terms of transfer to the HOA is the road or the roads, and there needs to be a transfer of common areas, which I can give you a time frame of probably in 30 to 60 days we can have that completed as well. Once those 2 things are done, it's our position that all the other infrastructure has been approved as it was part of the original plat, and it all had to be installed and inspected up front before when the development began. The electric, the water, the tap fees, the sewer, the impact fees, the gas, all that had to be done prior to shovel 1 and ready to go. So it's our position that we are pretty close to that 90% mark trigger. As far as a new PUD agreement, certainly we would be willing to visit that item, but like I say, as of right now, we're asking this body not to require any kind of plans or expenditure in regards to phase 2 and 3, based upon what I'm expressing to you tonight in terms of the developer's intentions, except for, and I can certainly understand your concern, except for making sure that the design that has been submitted is going to adequately handle the water and the soil erosion that might occur until such time as that sure I covered everything for you. In regards to the stop work orders, I have a little bit of concern. I know your legal counsel's not here tonight for reference to, but I have a little concern that those stop work orders were issued to the corporation who is the builder of those lots, not the developer. So, in my opinion, that may present an issue for the town of Kingston Springs, and that might be considered a taking. Because as it's been said, building on the lots is not what's really contributing to any of the water problems or the soil erosion or the water infiltration. So to issue the stop work order and not, at this time of year, it's very crucial. We've got about a 30-day window to complete construction. Asphalt plants start shutting down in about 30 days. So to get this road completed, to go ahead and get these two houses completed, and those are separate things. One is the developer, one is the builder. I think there's a disconnect with stop work order. Certainly, maybe being used to try to gain compliance of the developer, but it's really injuring the party who the building permit was issued to, and that was a different entity, separate from the developer. I mean, it would only help the issues that have been raised if that stop work order is lifted and those houses can be completed. You can get the sod down, get that done, and then move on to, and then the developer moving on with completing top coat of paving and getting that done. Which we're happy to work out a timeline for that to be sure that it gets done. So, I'll certainly answer any questions that you may have with me in regards to the issues that have been raised. Again, I'll say my client's been very attentive to the issues and is out on the property constantly, has engaged the homeowners to advise him of any issues that they're having, and even gone as far to talk about, remediating any damage that they might have, should they have some. Today, as I understand it, there's been some water infiltration into a couple of garages, but there's not been anything that's made it inside a home, etc. So hopefully with this plan that's been presented, and other measures that can be taken, we can remediate that, and that's not going to be a problem in the future.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rice.
Could you say what the timeline again was for phase 2 and 3?
As of right now, my client has not seen phase 2 and phase 3. Any initiation on that as being a probability for at least 10 years at this point. Am I correct, Mr. Murphy?
No, it's not much.
Sure. Do you mind, Mr. Murphy, let's go comment?
Thank you for that.
Oh, Mr. Murphy. Sure.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Your voice can be soft sometimes, and I apologize. We have sold 6 lots to Reaper Homes. Steve Reaper, and we go out of Midwest Supply. They're not telling when they're going to finish those homes. I met the Reapers on the site yesterday, and they're really aggressive on the lots, taking care of these things. For me, I guess I'm ultimately responsible, but they want to be good neighbors with me. And there's a lot of our against. I tell you what, they don't do much. I didn't know the water was going to Lee's house, and I so apologize for that. I did not know that.
Can you speak in as well?
I know it's a problem. I apologize. I can't hear. If anything takes under our
Okay.
sure that
Mr. Murphy, could you just address us on the issues, please, that we were just...
with regard to the timeline, the idea that the readers won't be here timeline. I can finish our part. We've got 8 lots that we have sold. And I've had a copy of the building's going to buy those lots. Fox Homes out of Rhineland, another building. They're prepared to start building. I'm not. That's not what I do for a living. I'm a licensed engineer. I just don't know how to build it. We come out somehow with the house.
Okay. So what I'd like to do now is ask anybody on the commission, do you have any questions for Mr. Mergel or Mr. Reisner based on comments I just provided?
Or Mr. Lovelace, the engineer, if you have some specific questions about the plan.
And he's on the,
And I spoke with Mr. Lundquist. He will not be here, he's traveling.
Okay.
Williamson County Schools in the fall place this week.
Okay.
So
all right.
I ask you directly again, is this plan going to be sufficient? Because I'm not paying this guy to do something that I don't want, we don't need. All I did is to get an erosion control plan and it'll stop the water and detain it. He said it will stop the 100-year flood. An engineer has to pick a number to design to. And the law requires for detention a 100-year flood.
Okay.
He said that's what they'll do for phase 1, and then the land of the flood in phase 2 and phase 3.
Okay.
The concern,
Go ahead.
the concern is flash flooding, correct? The concern is not the river flooding this, such as a 100-year flood. The concern is flash flooding, correct?
Yes.
And what does the state of Tennessee say about the water that comes off of your land?
Here's what they say exactly. I am to provide erosion control fences under my SWIP plan. In Cheatham County, these counties are different, but in Cheatham County, it's 3.5-inch rainfall event in a half hour, 30 minutes. The silt fences are designed to do that. They didn't do it, and there's a video that I saw and saw water from over the fence. But that was a 5.5-inch rain in 30 minutes.
Does the state of Tennessee consider the
What
amount of
I
rain?
did, though, is I spoke with Sharon. Sharon asked me to revise my plan on those 2 lots, and I did. Every 15 feet now, Mr. Chairman, going up that hill, there's no silt fence. So each one's going to have 3.5 inches in it, and a half. There's 6 fences up the hill now, both of those lots. They're just not coming off that hill. The water coming here is off the old farm road that's used for construction purposes. And we're about to block it off because that thing was over across there. So,
Okay. I have a question for Mr. Reisner, I think, because of what you presented. And this is just me trying to understand. I'm not an expert in any of this. Okay? I'll make that clear. So when you talk about the design was sufficient, the phase 1 design was sufficient to handle the water runoff, I think is what you said. And that's the grading plan, right? The grading plan for phase 1? Okay.
That plan along with the additional documents that go with it, yes.
So is that plan complete? It's not complete. So the phase 1 grading plan is not complete?
that's the revised grading plan, Mr. Chairman. This project goes back 15 years.
Right.
And all the grading plans, all that was done 15 years ago, approved by this body
Right.
15 years ago. And that's what we've been working off of. Sharon's, very competently calling our attention, it needs to be revised, and that's what this is.
Okay, so when you're talking about it's sufficient, you're talking about if it's completed, because it's not completed right now, right? I'm just trying to connect where we are on phase 1, because it's revised, so it still needs to be done. Is that what you're saying?
That, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Moore, that's the revised plan that's sufficient to
Right.
cover. That's the plan, that's the plan.
That would need to be done. That would need to be done. It's not done right now, right?
And Mr. Chairman, I'm
Right,
trying
no,
to
it hasn't been performed yet.
Okay, thank you.
Retention pond.
That makes more sense. Is that like a detention there? Is that what that's supposed to be, detention?
that is,
Okay.
I was thinking, silt fences don't stop water.
well, exactly.
Yeah, okay. You can put 15 silt fences down there, you don't stop.
Valley of water, all the way across.
Stop
into
silt.
that detention pond, cut it off and routing it.
So this is phase one, you're in phase one, but the revised phase one grading plan that you're showing here, and I'm just trying to make sure I'm getting it, is not completed. But you're saying that the engineer said when it's completed, it would be sufficient to handle
Yes, the plans are completed,
the grading is
the
not.
remediation work, actual work according to the plans.
It's not done. That's not done. Okay.
Correct.
So I have a second question, Mr. Reiser, and that was, when you talked about transferring improvements to the HOA, is that what you're talking about?
Mhm.
Roads and common areas? Does transferring improvement, maybe this is a question for you and Sharon too, but does transferring improvements include transferring the storm water management infrastructure, whatever that is? Is that part of the improvements?
Yes.
So when you talk about transferring the rest of the improvements, and you mentioned a road in common areas, would there also be an item in there of stormwater management that would be complete?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, now currently, on the plans that were submitted back and approved by the city in 2007, the stormwater and erosion control was given directly by the city at that time to the Ellerslie Homeowners Association. And they would be found in the files that the city has now on the plans.
Okay, I just wanted to understand this, so thank you.
It's the only thing that was given directly. It was given directly because the HOA today has the responsibility. If water's out there, it can give an easement between the houses. There's 5 feet on either side of the property line in favor of the HOA to have drainage.
Those were the only questions I didn't understand. Did anybody else have questions right now? Okay, and
I do. The 90%, at what point is that 90% satisfactory that was in this,
90%
to be able to turn over to the HOA? Is that 90% of phase one, 90% of phase two, three, what?
It can be an ambiguous statement. It is not. Within the covenants and restrictions and the PUD agreement for this project, it's completion of 90% of the lots, plus an inspection of all infrastructure improvements by the town with an engineer certified as compliant with our subdivision regulations. Then we're talking 90%. Usually that 90% is calculated as everything is addressed with the final top coat on the road. So that's what 90% means in this case. Mr. Chairman, is everybody done with questions for the applicant?
I think so. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I want to make one last statement before we. The town in 2008 hired an engineer. We paid for him through the pass-through agreement to the city, to the town. Hired an engineer to come out and inspect the facilities. And he wrote a letter to the town, and based on that letter is how we got $50,000 on bond. The water was in, the second side cheating, they accepted it, the sewer was in, the city's been collecting tap fees, the revenues, all 5 of it's working. The drainage was already given to the homeowners association. The gas, this, and electric was already in, and got 30 of us. Dixon Gas, Dixon Electric, and AT&T is out there with these, in favor of them, and so is Comcast. I mean, there's a whole lot going on about this project in 15 years. And tonight we have a drainage problem that we can fix. For sure, we'd like to fix it within the next month. So these people who live behind us in these houses don't have stuff to fix.
Okay, all right, thank you, sir.
Real quick, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Mr. Roger, I had a question for you, if you don't mind. At this point, the HOA has been formed, is that correct?
Yes.
And they have officers sitting on the HOA?
There's a board of directors, yes.
There's a board of directors. And are you aware of who represents them for legal counsel?
Currently, I do.
Thank you, Mr. Roger. If I may, Mr. Chairman, I have several observations that I would like to make sure that we make into the minutes.
Okay, please.
The plan that was presented by the engineer hired by Mr. Little is a soil and erosion control plan. It's not a stormwater plan. It serves the function of that in this particular case. Something for this planning commission to know, the reason why we spend so much time talking about soil erosion plans and SWIPs and all of that, when you apply for a permit for MPDES, which is water or pollution control, or an ARAP, which is another permit to actually enter the water stream or withdraw water with TDAC, they check your SWIP and your plan to make sure that it contains all the titles, headlines, and form that are required. They do not review the engineering for your plan. Mr. Myrtle is correct in that he submitted a plan for stormwater under a notice of coverage from TDAC back in 2007. That notice of coverage was issued. The city at that time, some engineer that was employed by the city looked at these plans. What we have discovered, and what is always going to be in your regulations, is irregardless of what you approve in the injunction project, if it is found to be insufficient to address a violation of stormwater disposition on someone else's property, you are required to address it as a planning commission and as a city. Secondarily, yes, Mr. Myrtle is correct. In the interim of the numerous complaints that we received to the city regarding stormwater disposition on lots that are occupied, we asked him to prepare another plan to contain the stormwater and slow it down. He did. He submitted that. The staff reviewed. We looked at the stop work order. There came another rain. It flooded people again. He then employed this engineer. I can only report to you what I've experienced. I've talked at length with the engineer that designed this plan. It is an erosion control submittal. A SWIP is a stormwater pollution prevention plan. It usually comes with a book. It's updated. You see them all the time. This is the 3 pages that you see. I asked him bluntly and directly, most of you know me would appreciate that statement, whether or not this was sufficient to contain the runoff coming off of phase 2 and 3 that's coming into phase 1 and running unchecked on these lots. And he said he could not say that. He said it would slow it down, but it would not. He could not tell me that it was going to stop. We asked for a grading plan. The slope is so steep on those phases of time that unless that is reduced, or unless there is some larger measure of check, and there's not a lot of room on all these occupied lots somewhere beyond phase 1 to maintain that water, it's just not going to happen. So, what I would like to do now, with your permission, is to go through this list quickly and briefly, and define for you again what I believe, in my opinion, after consulting with the engineer for this town. The first one, soil erosion on the lot causing damage. It's not only causing damage to the lot, it's causing damage to the base of the road and the other improvements that were placed as infrastructure. What I would like is a grading plan for all 3 phases that addresses the runoff that's coming into phase 1. State statute and our local statutes prohibit you from visiting your water, and at this point, phase 2 and 3 are not developed. We don't have a plan in place. They're just ball lots. They're not included in the PUD. They're just another lot. So I want a grading plan for all 3 phases with enough detention to stop the water from corrupting the adjoining properties. On the second element, the HOA is in no way responsible for the stormwater runoff, neither are the purchaser for lots. Until 90% of phase 1 is completed, no purchaser of a lot is responsible for any runoff, stormwater disposition, soil erosion plans, erosion fences. They're not responsible for any of that. It's solely the responsibility of the developer. So that, I just wanted to get that out of the way. None of that can be transferred to any other entity at this point. The PUD, I would like you to direct the applicant to enter into negotiations with staff to reframe the PUD so that we can correct the expiration date on it and incorporate the new bonding instrument into that, along with a grading plan into that PUD agreement, so that we can update it after an almost 15-year period. Third, the development plan as expressed for phase 1, and I want to make sure I understand and I'm stating this correctly, Mr. Reisner and Mr. Myrtle, is 46 years for the completion of phase 1?
That's correct. That's an estimate. depending on what happens.
4 to 6 years added to a almost 15-year timeline for phase one. That, in my opinion, is insufficient. It's insufficient. There are, how many lots in total are there in phase one, Mr. Merkel? How many lots in total are in phase one?
35.
35 lots. Of those 35 lots, two are under development by a company that you are a principal partner in. Is that correct? Energy Fit Solutions. He's the principal of the conversation separated the developer and the owner of those two lots. Even though it's a different company name, it's the same entities. So
You said no, it's not a principal.
he's not. So the ownership of those two lots that he pulled permits for resides somewhere else. Who owns those two lots? I apologize for the time this is taking, but we need to get this right. It's been 14 years.
He's not the principal.
Okay, but he is the builder who pulled the permits for lots that he is the developer of on this project. So the stop work was not done to be punitive. It's done to stop any more damage from occurring with debris and construction and piles and all until the water is stopped. People are living in this every single day. So require them to engage in negotiation of the PUD agreement that's expired. Require a grading plan for phase 1, 2, and 3 sufficient to detain the water for all 3 sections of the PUD. Third, to increase the amount of the bonding instrument to 300. You could do it to the penny at 389, 763, 19, or we can make it around 390 with directing staff to draft that, present it to Mr. Reisner. Also with a political in it that as costs go up, they will absorb those in their bond for the construction amounts. To give you context on this, I know the prices are much higher now than they were in 2007. Your original letter of credit is $50,000. Here we sit on this project with a proposed bonding instrument of $315,000. So to say that the original bonding instrument was insufficient might be an understatement. And we want, as costs rise, and they are in the industry every day, we want that bond to move with those rising costs so that the city doesn't inherit any liability. Third, I apologize. I would like at least a minimal drafting and drawing of phase 2 and 3. So Mr. Merkel expressed to me that he sees those as larger lots, not so compact, not so close together. So a sketch plan is sufficient. I just need something to include in that code to identify phase 2 and 3 so that we have some idea of what we're looking for down the road. Fourth, this is rather than asking for direction, I'm advising the Planning Commission that I will be having a conversation with TDAC regarding the current TDAC permit for the site next week, and I'll report those back to you at our next meeting. So those are the elements that I wish to address, unless anybody has any questions at this point. Other than to offer one other observation, over the period of 3.5 years, staff has met with Mr. Merkel on several occasions. He's attended our planning commissions on a couple of occasions. Discussion has been held about maybe potentially connecting to Wood Circle, if you remember that, and then moving forward on this particular project. We are now 3.5 years into a discussion that has produced very little output on behalf of the developer, other than permits and selling lots. So those are the things that I would like for the Planning Commission to consider as requirements for this project so that we can move forward. The residents that live in this development and the other issue that we're having is climbing on the road, which creates a hazard. And regardless of the SWIP, the distinction between what TDAC requires and SWIP requires and stormwater requires and your flood ordinance is that all of those regulations forbid you from offloading your water onto someone else. period. That's what they say. There's a lot of verbiage, and a lot of technical terminology. When you boil it down to its base level, that's what it says. You can't put your water on the other guy. So that's what I'm asking for. It's for tools to cure this.
Okay, I just want to try to get the words on these things.
Yes, sir.
So one is a requirement to update the PUD.
Yes, sir.
So between the city staff
And the development.
and the developer.
Yes, sir.
The other one is to require a grading plan for phases 2 and 3.
That's correct.
The third one is to direct staff to increase the bonding amount to $390,000 with a provision to change it to reflect future price increases.
That's correct.
And the fourth item was that the developer provides a minimal sketch plan for phases 2 and 3 to be included with the updated plan.
That's correct. And I would like for that sketch plan to be presented at the next planning commission meeting, which is in December. And I want to address one final thing, and then I promise we're done with this discussion unless anybody has anything else, is that I would state for the record, nothing about stop work is punitive at all. It's simply to stop the bleed until we can find some stop measures to issue on the property. And the stop work was issued, a plan was submitted to the city, a remedial plan interim, stop work was lifted, the issue resurfaced, I replaced the stop work order. When it doesn't solve the problem, you have to stop the source. So that's what we got. So with that, that's my last.
And that exists between the city and the developer. But that's not one of the items of our motion.
No, sir, I just wanted to comment
Information. Okay.
for the record.
So, would these all be in one motion?
They certainly may. They
Okay.
do not need to be separated.
Let me ask a question. What was in the original master plan? Just phase 1?
Yes. Phase
Really?
1 was done, yes. It was submitted as a future development, which you see occasionally, Mr. McCain.
Yeah.
Sometimes things are done in phases, there'll be a timeline, and those phases usually come when we'll do phase 1 within this many years, then we'll submit a plan 2 years prior to the
So
expiration
even
of
the
that.
prelims, it wasn't all presented?
No, it was
And the
not.
final master plan, it wasn't all on there?
It was not. It was submitted as it is.
So, do we have a motion?
I commend the chairman for capturing that, and I make the motion.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Are there any other questions or comments from the planning commission? Okay, so the motion is that we require an update to the PUD to be worked on between the city and the developer. To require a grading plan for phase 2 and 3, for phases 2 and 3. To direct staff to increase the bonding amount to $390,000 with provision to change it with future price increases.
Direct the developer to increase.
To the developer
Yes,
to increase the bonding amount to $390,000 with a provision to change it with future price increases.
Correct.
And then for the developer to provide a minimal sketch plan of phases 2 and 3 to be included in the updated plan.
That's correct.
Now, all that's going to take time. What are we going to do about that?
What we're going to do about that, at the city's disposal at this moment, there's a letter of credit. That's all we have. We have $50,000. If it becomes necessary, we will proceed to use it. That's all I know to do. Whether that's hiring an engineer to solve a problem or to actually do grading upon the property or to cost an engineer to do so. That's a very drastic action. That really never happens anywhere. But as I sit month after month, and as John takes calls and I take calls, this is an issue that needs to be resolved. And I don't know any other mechanism other than to require it to be done. We tried every other form of resolution at this point.
And that's the purpose of the stop work, is to get the water stopped before proceeding on phase 1.
Yes, sir. On the lot, as I went through this afternoon, I inspected every single time I come to town. There were piles of construction debris on the lot that are causing the water to run around it in a couple of places. Silt fences are down again. The double silt fences are down in spots. There's flooding in the road. They put gravel, packed gravel for the base back in the road behind a garage and the house that's occupied. It's eroding again. So regardless of the amount of rain, until you stop the flow of water, regardless of what you put in its path, it's going to come down the hill. It's plowed in ruts between the lots where their utilities are, their phone, underground cables, ruts are being plowed, so it's just got to stop. Stop work is to prevent any more travel, wearing of the ground, wearing of the road, all of those things until the issue can be resolved.
The water issue, the current
Yes,
water
sir.
issue.
That is correct.
Does that answer your question, Brian?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is another example of trying to make a silver purse out of the size here. And we're constantly faced with that in Kingston Springs because of the terrain.
I would add to that, Commissioner, if I may, Commissioner Campbell, is that HUD agreements, and the reason why I spend so much time focusing on it, and property projects and those technical documents, the reason why I spend so much time focusing on them, is sometimes the submission that you think is going to work doesn't. So it behooves us, midterm, in these things, to revisit them, to make sure that the measures that are in place are sufficient for the development that's occurring. Responsibility in all phases lies with the developer until they meet the circumstances of the project approved. That has not been done in this case.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor with a second. All in favor?
Roll call, because this
Oh,
involves
roll call
money.
vote,
This
okay.
involves money, so we have, I apologize.
Okay, so just a minute, you'll give me your vote when I call you the roll. For this motion, Keith Alden,
Yeah, Mike.
Tony Campbell,
Yes.
Josh Everly's absent, Tony Gross,
Yes.
Lauren Hill is absent, Brad McCain.
Yes.
That was a yes, Brad?
Yes.
Okay. Mike Padilla, that's me, yes. Chuck Slater?
Yes.
Bob Stoller?
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes. All right.
Mr. Chairman, we may, Mr. Reiser and Mr. Merville, the next planning commission meeting will be in December. There is not anything on the agenda until November. So it will meet here the second Thursday of December.
Are you envisioning an issuance of a citation?
Pardon?
Are you envisioning an issuance of a citation?
I,
Address
at
that
this
point?
point, will discuss that with the rest of the administrative staff, and that advice will be taken.
We'd like to take that particular issue up. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So item B is the Roy B. McPherson property. If you want to stay for the remainder of the meeting, you can, but if you were just here for that part, you're welcome to leave. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So item B, the Roy B. McPherson, 115 East Kingston Springs Road, adjacent to the Stuff It In storage business in Lyman Hills Road. So now I need to recess for the design review committee. I need a motion to recess.
Motion to recess.
Okay, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The planning commission is recessed, and now I will call to order the design review committee. Do I need to take roll? We're all here. Okay. Same people in the minutes for the planning commission. All right, so now we have consideration of design review committee approval of proposed building materials, lighting, landscape, and security plans for the PUD 40-unit multifamily development.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You are, okay?
I apologize. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McPherson has joined us tonight. A couple of these items we can dispense with rather quickly. The lighting plan, if you remember, was in your final development plan from last meeting, and the landscape plan was as well. Those meet the requirements for your subdivision regulation, and I calculated the nice stuff regulations of our design review. You all remember how much fun those are. In order for that to be approved on file, but you're still required as a design review committee to bless those. They were approved by the planning commission and approved by staff. So 2 items. I apologize.
No, I apologize myself, but Mr. Chairman, if we could go back and approve the minutes from the last design review and approve the agenda.
I apologize, John.
Okay, so, all right, so the design review meeting, is it just this item for today?
That is, but we do need to approve
The minutes,
the
oh.
minutes.
Oh, here it is.
So moved.
All right, all in favor of the minutes from the design review board?
All right.
Okay, any opposed? No. All right, so now we have,
We need to approve the agenda. So moved.
okay, all right, the agenda first, okay.
I think you
On the meeting, okay, not the agenda, okay, right. So, all right, we got the minutes, okay? Now, we're going to approve the design review board meeting agenda, which they have before them. All right, have a motion for that.
I have a motion and a second.
And a second, okay. All in favor? Aye. Okay, so, that is approved. And we have one item. Killed about 10 trees for this one. Okay, so, this is what I just read, the consideration of proposed building materials, lighting, landscape, and security plans, and Sharon has already told us about the landscape and lighting meeting are requirements.
We have two additional items that are up for your consideration as a design review committee. Mr. McPherson has joined us. John has some, I believe, information that was also included in your design packet last week. For the exterior materials, you have to officially approve those. I have, there you go. So you can kind of see these. These are fiber cement or batten, kind of your common stock. I have suggested to, and there are some architectural reliefs in the eaves at the top of the structures. And I have suggested to Mr. McPherson that he may want to consider using some faux stone or something else to break it up. It's not required. This is an acceptable material. But there's some very large footprints to have all one color. I've also suggested he may want to order anything in a different direction or use 2 tones of paint or something. That's a design choice. It's not required. So the materials, Mr. McPherson, if I'm speaking, please join us at the podium if you don't mind. With fiber cement, if you go through, John, and scroll through the rest of the materials.
That's it.
Okay, so we have all of them in front of you now. For the look of it, the landscaping has been approved, and so this meets, if you'll go back to Sean, this meets the requirements of your design review standards and guidelines. So if you have any questions of him, and I think there was a concern expressed in the last meeting regarding security. I can tell you that the site is well lit. The lights will be shielded from the adjoining properties. Remember, if you'll think back to the Thornton property where they're shielded on the back and they can't go out on the surface of the road. I've had that discussion with them. The lighting plan does include that. But it is well lit so that there aren't any dark places on the property. It's clear in the front. There's no landscaping barriers for the bad guys to hide behind. In addition to that, there are security cameras on all of the buildings. And Mr. McPherson, will the office location be monitored all day, every day?
Correct.
And that's 24 hours a day, was my understanding from what he put in his presentation. So someone will be on the premises in the office building near the front location, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's, from what I understand from Mr. McPherson, it is his intent that it be safe, that it be well lit, that it be accessible, that there be recreational opportunities. I will give him credit. This has been a long process. It's been a long process. I will give him credit. He has stuck it out. Over the past 2 years, he and I and his design team and the city manager and all the utilities have worked really hard to get here. I think that given my perspective and your need for workforce pool, this will be an asset to your community. You may no longer have to ride down Lyman Hills Road and see a health warning sign sworn on every single building. So it's good quality, decent, safe, affordable housing, which is something this community frankly needs from time to time. So if you have questions on Mr. McPherson, my staff recommendation is to approve.
Any voodoo dolls do you have? Sir? How many voodoo dolls do you have? I'm sorry? How many voodoo dolls do you have?
There will be no
I'll say this, Mr. McPherson has been tough and stuck with it hard, and he's really been real responsive. And I'm one of the ones at the start of all of this that wasn't particularly favorable. Thank you.
I want to thank you for your focus on security. I appreciate that, the focus on security, making it a safe place. I do have a follow-on question. Can you show the 3-story or 2-story, whatever it is, right there, 3-story? So Sharon brought up just a whole lot of, one color and everything, and the idea of breaking it up. Is there anything that...
These are not the colors that we use, they're red, blue, and the other colors, it's orange and hardy board. It's 2 colors of hardy board. So behind where the patio, the balcony is at, that's a different color. And so
okay, so underneath those, okay. Or the porches.
Perfect. And Mr. McPherson, just for your edification, all of those details will be captured in the PUD agreement, which you will be seeing in December. So we get to do another one of those. So those details for paint and the color of the roof and all that. I'm sorry, I know you're having trouble hearing me. I know, it's really difficult. Is it okay if it comes a little bit closer to the...
Sure.
You can come forward with your ears. We had this podium so far back as Ms. Murphy was on the screen. The colors of the roof, the distinction colors, and the party board and all of that will be captured in the plan unit development agreement that you'll sign. So what you just relayed to him, I'll write all that down in the agreement, and they'll hear that in December. But effectively, with this, this project is approved over the colors.
Okay.
Right, understand?
So, does anybody else have any questions on these 4 items: materials, lighting, landscaping, security plans? All right, we have
I have a motion to recommend to the planning commission.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McPherson. So now I have to adjourn this meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion and a second. Okay, all in favor of adjourning? Aye. Okay.
Can we go back and revisit that? I don't think John's
Design Review Committee meeting is adjourned. Where am I? These pieces of paper. Okay. All right. Now, okay, so we'll reconvene the Planning Commission. Is that good? All right.
Then you have to consider the recommendation from the Design Review Committee.
Okay, which is not in here, so I'm going back. All right, all in favor? Aye. Okay, we accept the Design Review Committee. Okay.
You guys sure about that?
Listen, I know this is funny for all of us, but it actually says it in the state statute that your planning commission is your Design Review Committee.
Okay, so no more old business? Pardon me?
Who seconded it?
Oh, did we all?
Was the motion, Chuck was second, right?
Yeah.
Tony Campbell and...
Okay.
Those guys have...
Let's keep on this, guys, come on. Have no problem here.
Okay. So, under new business here, Brian McCain.
Thank you, Ms. Towns. Sorry.
We have Brian McCain representing Moore's Land Trust.
The neighbor next to Mr. McPherson, who's been shutting off her gate, blocking off her stuff. That's Ms. Towns. I apologize, Mr. Chair, I'll be quiet now. He's like,
Okay.
Mr. Campbell, who fusses at me for doing that in a meeting, let's do that in a meeting.
She's consistent, she shows up.
Okay. Was there any old business, Sharon, on the right of way or the easement?
No, sir, we're
Okay,
done.
we're good on that. Okay.
Yeah, we're finally there.
All right. So now Brian McCain, representing the trustees of Creating Moore Land Trust.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. McCain, please recuse for the record.
I'll recuse myself.
Now,
This vote.
just as a note, I'm not trying to sway anybody. If anybody votes no, we have a problem. Okay, just let me know. We can't get there because we don't have a quorum, so.
1, 2.
No, wait, 2, 4, 3, 4.
No,
Yeah, because somebody
we
can
have
say,
four.
no, 5 is quorum. 1, 2, 3.
Quorum's in the
No, we still got one, you're good. Keith came in late. I was sweating.
I came in on time.
Yeah, Keith came in so good. I was having a heart attack.
I think I've got this side of the table over here. I'm not sure about
Mr.
that.
McCain, you're on. I have no comment. I've reviewed it. It meets the subdivision regulations. You're on.
Okay, so we've got a commercial lot, it's the daycare, there's an empty field next to the daycare, south side. And it is 1.1 acres. The daycare currently enters and exits on Moore Circle, which is one way. The new lot, just because of the way Moore Circle is configured, the only way that they can enter and exit is going to be on Highway 49 or 249, West Kingston Springs Road.
City sewer,
City
Mr.
sewer.
McCain's applicant owner has chosen this as their front entrance. And one observation that I would make is that the setback here is not a clear animal. When you are on a street that has a setback, much as our main street does, your setback becomes whatever the setback is for the other buildings. There's no definitive answer. We don't require side setbacks in commercial properties, but because this one corners too, right, he had to choose an elevation so we could see where the rules would apply. Those things are both noted on the plat, so in the future, when somebody pulls this plat, they won't think there's no setback that's required. Okay?
So yeah, city water, city sewer, electricity on site. That's about it.
Okay. Anything else? No. On this side? Okay, do we have a motion?
So. Second.
All right. All in favor of final plat? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and Brian was recused from that one. Okay. Item 249.
Item B.
All right, yeah, wait a minute. Pass my bedtime. Item B, State Route 249, corner study.
As you will remember, Mr. Chairman, and the rest of the Planning Commission, that this was a corridor study that was a grant sponsored by TDOT. Yeah, sorry, got my acronyms mixed up. Yes, sponsored by TDOT to study initially Lumen Hills Road Corridor and Liven Hills Road Corridor and the expansion to SR 249, which is East Kingston Springs Road. City planner and I have had multiple conversations with TDOT. We were not happy with the initial report that was produced. They came back with another draft, and we had additional notes. They came back with another draft. I think we're on probably the 5th iteration of this particular document. One of the contentions was the additional information of expanding State Road 249, East Kingston Springs Road, from 2 lanes to 3 lanes all the way to Highway 70. We did finally get some verbiage that we were pleased with from TDOT indicating that it was a necessary expansion in the future and something that would warrant the future of additional instruction. They came back with an initial cost that we thought was pretty exorbitant because they were looking at replacing the bridge over the Harpeth River and also replacing the intersection at Highway 70 along with the train trestles and whatever else they could think of. We asked them to back that off to just go to the city limits. They were also going to take out the large curve, take 3 lots in right-of-way and eminent domain, and it was a bit of a process. So we've asked them to back that off, to leave the road topography just as it is, to back it just to the town limits. The price came back still fairly high, a lot higher than we anticipated. But I had a long discussion with Ian Preston at TDOT today, and we've decided that we would like to go ahead as far as staff recommend this proposal as it is submitted. the cost of the cost of making that road 3 lanes right now is $26 million in 2026 prices, which we think is steep. Had a conversation with Ian today, and we went back and forth about the possibility of including this report with that cost figure in it, or including this report without that cost figure in it. Our initial thought was that including this cost figure in this report, even though it was run from TDOT's empirical database, we felt that including this information in this report would possibly steer future development away should it be picked up at some date because of the high price tag. But after further discussion with Mr. Preston today, his point was that if this cost estimate was left in, it would show that this project was this project had enough urgency in it that a cost estimate was initially developed rather than it just being a thought of a good idea. That makes sense. I'm probably not explaining myself.
No, it makes sense.
If I may, John, I want to insert a couple of things. That is, as Mr. Campbell and I are somewhat familiar with, and John is somewhat familiar with, known as TDOT geek speak. So, it's TDOT geek speak. They're just double speaking in order to say this. If I were to take a survey of 100 engineers outside the store right now who do roads and contractors, I probably would be laughed out of the room if I asked them, did it cost $26 million to pave 1 mile road on a relatively flat terrain where you're not putting up red lights, you're not firing, you're just dropping a lane, turn lane. So we're going to be stuck with this one way or the other, but at least we got it in there, right, which gives us a shot. And then John and I kind of came up with an idea. That's your on you. We'll just tell them what our idea is to do next.
We would like to include in this report an addendum that gives basically a second estimate, a second opinion of costs for this particular project. So we'll reach out to our engineering firm, which is Collier at the moment, to get a cost estimate that they would generate, and then probably a third estimate just to make sure that we have adequate data that indicates we feel that $26 million is a little expensive to pave 1 mile of road. So that is
our experience with Collier, they don't look back and say like some ridiculously low number.
It very well could be.
You get 3 and you've got one that, I'm sorry, John, I apologize. You get one that's at the apex of the universe. You get one that sits somewhere near the bottom of the toilet. And then somewhere in the middle you will meet some interaction. This is not a dance that this planning commission nor the city is unfamiliar with. We've done this dance before multiple times. So I concur with that opinion. I think if we get 3, and then move back that Collier Engineering does work with TDOT and comes, I mean, would you like to be Mr. President, try to defend your $26 million when your engineering firm says it's 30? So it kind of puts a little leverage, a little pressure on you. So we would like to propose that we take that tax. It's going to cost a couple of bucks, but we're not going to get anywhere. And the other thing they did include, John, I think it's important to note, is we identified some bald land on either side of Little Mills Road. Other side that is now currently gated and not underused that could provide potentially in the future, if we identify it, another way for people to get away from the interstate approach. Local traffic, right? Yeah. If we could just get it to go away. Most of it's floodplain or floodway, which you can put a road in there, right? And on the other side, not so much. But if you allow them to develop without including them in some sort of a plan, you are never, ever, ever going to be able to address the traffic issues in the future. Yeah. Because you're going to, I see Mr. McCain nodding his head because he looks at the land from up here too. There isn't any other potential. So then including that in there as a reference also gives us a little more toenail on the edge. So with that,
You need a motion?
city manager, we need recommendation to the city commission to sign the resolution. Is that
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I would like to commend the city manager. This was a tough go, multiple meetings, lots of information. He's absorbed a lot, asked a lot, pushed a lot. I did my usual charming and sweet.
Move on.
Shut.
Yes.
Item C, discussion on traffic speeding mitigation in Kingston Springs.
You're going too fast.
Do we need to, is that something we,
You
part of
have,
our business?
and so go ahead.
That's what happens when you're so rude.
Up there, cutting your packet. Okay, why is this here? Why are we talking about speed limits when the city commissioner is the one who said speed limits? The reason that we're talking about speed limits and you're going to make a recommendation is because those pages that are sitting on the board up there are your subregs. You set the design speed for all roads. You adopt the transportation road map. You assign the rating of the street, whether it's a collector or whether it's a tertiary or secondary road. So it affects your book. So by state statute, because it affects your book and the city commission is considering a change to speed limits in the city, it has to come here for you. Now, do we have the page for the recommendations that will take you, or do we just want to tell you?
You're making a recommendation from our meeting last Thursday.
Oh, we don't have it for the screen, but it's in the
It
packet.
was in the packet.
Yes.
We're talking about that staff comment on speed limits?
Yes.
Okay.
So, if you may, the staff had several meetings. The last meeting we had Mayor Gross, City Planner Armstrong, Chief of Police Ivy, and myself to discuss speed limits inside the town of Kingston Springs. And we came up with several different options that we thought that were safety in mind and consistency in mind, and simplicity in mind as well. The three items that we're looking at currently are: one, increasing the speed limit of West Kingston Springs Road to match that of East Kingston Springs Road.
Up to.
Wait
a minute. Up to Maple.
Up to Maple, where it would then be reduced to 20 miles per hour, along with Main Street as 20 miles per hour. We would like to also increase the speed limit of Mount Pleasant to 35 miles per hour. All remaining streets inside the town limits of Kingston Springs would be 20 miles per hour. We would increase signage across the neighborhoods. We would also include solar-powered flashing speed limit signs as another speed control.
Those work.
Now, I have a couple of observations, I'm going to stop because I know that this is going really long now. A long day for all of us. The thought process behind the change on West Kingston Springs Road is it's now not congruent with the other side of the road. So you're coming into Kingston Springs, you don't know squat from Shinola, as my grandmother used to say. You get to the red light at Lebanon Hills Road, the approach to the interstate, you're 35 up to that point, everything's good. And then all of a sudden it's not, you're at 30. And you get popped, right? Or you don't get popped. I understand Mr. Campbell's concern, but it's also my observation, having done a traffic study, that reduction of 5 miles per hour from that red light all the way down to that curve, not quite there, maybe at Miss Priscilla's, but that reduction in speed is causing bottlenecking in traffic that is causing the interstate approach to get even worse because we've introduced trucks, because we're stopping people at the red light, right? There's only so much room getting up. In the mornings, it's becoming untenable getting up to the interstate. We're about to start construction over there. And then you're slowing it down on the other side. People don't automatically know that it went from 35 to 30. They don't know that. Then they get frustrated. So Chief, John, I, and frankly Asho all think it needs to be systematic on both sides of the road. You have barriers for school twice a day to slow traffic down to 20 miles an hour. It just doesn't make sense.
15.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense to have it different on either side of that.
Yeah.
And for Mount Pleasant, same thing. There's not enough traffic being generated on that road to justify dropping the speed limit down that road. It's just not. If you look at it, it's a secondary collector street. It's 35 miles an hour. So,
I don't think I've ever seen that, where you go across the intersection and automatically
Pardon?
switches. I don't think I've ever seen that, where you go across the intersection and automatically switches.
It does. There's a sign.
Well, I mean, you gotta get down the road before you do that.
If you're behind me, you'll know, because I actually set my cruise control down from 35 to 30 as soon as I cross the intersection all day.
so there you go. But that's, we would like for, if you don't have partner with this, for you to recommend this, because it's going to change this book.
But you move back over the reduction of 20 miles at Maple Street.
That's correct. So the idea is just to take it and make it consistent on, I mean, because we think about it.
I was concerned about that because Oak Street is very dangerous.
Coming out.
Oak and turn to go east on Kingston Spring Road, you're taking the life in your hand.
Well, I think that while I understand your concern, what my research is, and I discussed this at length with an engineer, what my research has determined is that 5 miles an hour in that general area is not enough to increase the safety risk or anything else. The bigger safety risk is that change going on either side of that at rush hour in the morning and rush hour in the evening. So as you get to Maple, you know, it stops, it goes down right then, and we'll let them know it's dropping down to 20 miles an hour going around, and it should provide some relief in some areas where we really need them right now.
Some of our biggest issues, I think, is the fact that once you get past there and you drive through town, that 30-mile-an-hour speed limit there is too much, a lot too much, and this solves that problem. And I think that something that, with 2 items in here, but from the enforcement level, basically having 2 speed limits in town makes it really easy for the police to enforce those speed limits and make it easy to defend those speed limits, those tickets in court, because nobody can play dumb if there's 2 speed limits in town. That's what there is.
Well, this is all fine and dandy, but then the police department needs to start writing tickets.
They have upped their presence, I will say.
I understand.
They have.
Upping their presence is not the key. Writing tickets is the key.
Yeah.
I sit in my living room and I look out that corner and there's trucks flying by there. I know they're not going 45 miles an hour.
Yeah. No,
When I used to cut my grass along Kingston Springs Road, they would go by me so fast I had to go along.
Well, Chuck, we're gonna widen that road for you, so that'll be fine.
Oh, so I'll be further back from the draft.
$26 million.
That'll solve the problem.
So when is there any action needed here?
Yes, a recommendation from the city commission, because they're going to hear it.
To adopt those new speed limits?
Just we're recommending the staff recommendations to them.
Right.
There are 2 things in your packet. I'm trying to be sensitive here. There are 2 proposals in your packet. One of them was submitted by someone who is not staff.
So
We're asking you to recommend this forward to the city commission. They have the ultimate decision.
Okay. So do we have a motion?
Let's back up a little bit. Starting at Line Hills Road,
Yes, sir.
going westbound,
Yes, sir.
what's the speed limit going to be there?
35.
35.
Yes, sir.
Until you get to
Maybe. And it drops to 20.
And it dropped to 20. Okay.
Yes, sir.
You're having to do speed sign,
correct.
right? Okay. On the westbound side, on the eastbound side,
35.
35.
As it is.
We can't do anything with the east side of the state.
Got the state road,
Stay,
right?
can't touch it.
And then, of course, once you go through town, because people use, of course, they go through there, that's how they get to White Bluff and Dixon. Once they go through town and make a turn, it'll go back to 35 miles an hour when they make a left turn at the stop sign. And that'll stay consistent, because once you go over the bridge, it goes to 35 miles an hour anyway, so all the way out.
And we took into account, Mr. Slater, that curve right there is a natural slowdown impediment anyway, so it's a perfect place to reduce it to 20 and then take the right down. Okay?
Right, that's exactly right.
And I believe they really are putting an honest effort out of it. And I can even attest, I've had complaints about people getting from people that got speeding tickets. And I was like, so,
If you don't speak, you don't get a ticket.
yeah.
Simple as that.
All right, so do we have a motion?
Second.
We have a second. And this is this motion is,
Recommend the staff report.
okay, on
Be
speed
careful
limits.
of advertising. Recommend the staff report
On speed
on
limits.
speed limits to the
To the city
city commission.
commission.
You are an advisory committee recommending a report.
Any other questions on this motion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Last item, I promise, discussion only. Mr. Chairman.
You're missing one.
No.
Flashback.
What?
She said last item. This is
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Tony can do that one. It's pretty. And she's- In your packet, because all infrastructure improvement projects have to come to planning commission. Okay? Notice the splash pad is being expanded. Some people love it, some people not. It's irrelevant. It's on the ground. So it's in your packet. You are looking at the layout in the plan. It is a public improvement. It's been vetted by staff. All the engineering is done, everything's done, so all we're asking you to do is approve the site plan only. I don't need you to approve anything with the site plan.
Is that
So moved.
We got a second?
No way.
Is there a second?
Second.
Wait, is that the site plan?
Yeah, that yellow.
The yellow stuff.
It's the pink one,
Yes.
Brian. It's the pink one.
All in favor?
I mean, I guess we're in trouble if we don't approve it, right? The site is already.
Any opposed? The motion passes for the site plan for the splash pad.
Thank you for catching that. Now we got this. In your packet, it's going to take 10 seconds unless someone starts asking questions. Everybody see my face? I'm teasing.
This thing,
Yes, sir. We promised to bring you back a copy of the HUD agreement between the Town of Kingston Springs and the Golf Club of DVI LLC. You approved the four corners of the content of this several meetings ago. It is now done. This goes, to give you an understanding of where it goes and how it goes, it's going to the City Commission next Thursday. They will either approve or not approve it. If they approve it, it will come back to you for signature only. And Mr. Slater will be signing it. You are not required to approve it. Once the PUD is approved, the project documents are approved, which you did. The agreement is a contract, so that goes to the city. They approve it or disapprove it and sign it, and then the planning commission secretary signs it, saying that it's in agreement with the plans that you approved at the planning commission. This has been the subject of, you ready? 73 staff hours.
Okay? So that was FYI.
That was FYI.
Okay.
did Mr. Ingram pay for it?
They're going to pay for it at my rate. I'm cheap.
Congratulations. So, do we have anything else, John?
No.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn from Tony?
So moved.
Okay, all in favor?